this is a beginning point. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. I got the meaning, and I got to write it down, because I don't want to forget it.
Just win, baby.
And welcome to the Gold Jacket Podcast, proudly sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. I'm your host this week, Connor Donald. As always, my co-host, Jim, unfortunately came down with a cold. We're going to assume it's a cold right now because his daughter's had colds. So, so he got into back out this week, but thank God, our sixth man, Coach Craig, always there for us when we need him the most. So happy to have him along. You can find me on Twitter at Connor10. You can find Craig on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. Also his YouTube channel where he's dropping NBA DFS stuff. He also dropped his NFL waiver wire video today. So definitely go and check that out because I'm sure there's a lot of people in a bit of a pinch at some positions as we get this late in the year and looking for, that playoff wonder, somebody to help get you through the playoffs. Myself and Craig are proud members of the True North Fantasy Football Network. Make sure to check out the entire network on Twitter at True North FFB, YouTube, the TNFF Network, and on the internet, TrueNorthFFB.com. You can find articles, rankings, podcasts, streams, and so much more. Welcome to Week 11 of the NFL season. Of course, without Jim, we're not going to do Tuddy or we're not going to do Going Bananas today, although I'm sure Coach Craig could have found this one. We'll leave it to the professionals here and leave it to Jim. I'm sure he'll drop one Thursday when he drops the audio for the podcast. But for now, we're going to do an emergent star. We're going to do Tuddy or Muddy, and we are going to do Gold and Fool's Gold, where we talk starts and sits for the week. Craig, man, what is up?
Oh, not too much. Yeah, obviously. It's probably a good thing Jim missed for that Going Bananas. It's not the best touchdown week, right? We got the Patriots and the Falcons too. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game, and touchdown predictability is going to be pretty all over the place too.
If there's going to be a guy who finds it, it'll probably be Jim, but we'll see what he brings to us on Thursday because I'm sure he's not going to miss out on it, as disgusting as it is. As long as he's not having to pick like an over under or more or less or something, he's okay. So we'll start off by digging right into the emergent star. I'll start, and I mean, he's not really he's kind of an emergent star because he's finally getting his opportunity, but I'm going with Ramondre Stevenson on this one. I think that this week proved to me that they don't really need Brandon Bolden that much. I think they have a really viable two-headed monster in Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. And Bolden can just kind of come in if somebody needs a break or if somebody's injured or something. But Ramondre Stevenson is proved fully capable in the receiving game. Obviously, Damian Harris is almost non-existent in the receiving game, but he's great on the ground. I think, and if you have like Harris and Stevenson coming at you, like Stevenson's a violent runner. Harris is a really good runner. He eats contact and keeps going. I think they have a really good opportunity there with a two-headed monster. And I think that the window to potentially buy Stevenson, obviously he's just coming off that huge week, might be to be a little bit more patient as they figure things out between when Harris comes back and how they want to divvy the touches up. But he's definitely a guy to look out for because every time he's been given the opportunity, he's really stepped up to the occasion. And I think he can play a receiving back role, a power back role, and Damian Harris can keep his early down rushing workload the same. But obviously this is a New England Patriots, so we never know what's going on in that backfield. But to me, seems like a good opportunity to really keep your eye on where the splits go. Damian Harris was back at practice today, or at least going through the walkthrough because they play Thursday night, so they didn't have a practice. They had a walkthrough. So we'll see how things go from there and if he comes back from his concussion. But emergent star for me, Ramondre Stevenson. What about you, Craig?
And I don't think Brandon Bolden goes all the way away either because he's the only guy they trust in pass protection at this point in time. So Ramondre Stevenson can obviously catch the ball, but when it comes down to like 2-minute drill, if they're behind in the game, I think Bolden's still going to be in there more times than not. He had a nice little screen pass where he juked a guy out of his pants too, actually. I was kind of surprised how well he moved. But I'm going to go with the other New England Patriot, and it's going to be Mack Jones. He pretty much showed everybody why he is their guy now at this point in time. Last week, very efficient, 19 out of 23, and he had the 3 touchdowns. He had some very, very nice throws once again. And that accuracy, it's not just because he was at Alabama. The accuracy is there in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I like that one too, because, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to pick him, but like, I don't know how great he's going to be for fantasy. To me, he kind of sticks to me like your second or your third quarterback chosen in a super flex league, where you go with a higher end quarterback and then you go with the safe guy who maybe like Derek Carr-esque, Kirk Cousins-esque, they're gonna have some boom games, but they're super safe quarterbacks, and they may just give you a really nice floor to play on when you don't know what to do at that super flex position, or if you're in need of the bye week. So he definitely is a good one, and he's definitely looked the best of this quarterback rookie class, mostly for the fact that some of them have barely gotten opportunity as well. And so, I agree with you on that one. It definitely is a good one. He should be a cheaper quarterback option in super flex leagues, although after this week, maybe not so. But maybe going forward, when people see, he offers that 15-point floor, and that's relatively where he stays, you might be able to buy him up as a second or third quarterback to have on your roster. So I definitely like that one too, Craig.
I think altogether too, he reminds me like of a young Phillip Rivers, like when Phillip Rivers first came into the NFL, where he's got some of that upside. He's never going to hurt you, but just like in today's game, we want that rushing from the quarterback too. So he's always going to be kind of like that low end quarterback one.
Absolutely. And I know that there's a lot of people who kind of throw shade at him because he cannot run, or he pretty much can't run.
He can move a little.
He can move a little, but he pretty much can't run. He can move out of the pocket to get away from pressure. That's about the extent of it. But like, there's pocket passers that you want. Nobody's crying about Tom Brady. After this week was pretty rough, but generally no one's crying about Tom Brady. You can have some safe pocket passers you can roll with. And like I said, they give you a safe floor. Don't draft him as your first quarterback, obviously, because you're going to be disappointed week in and week out to watch this guy go between 12 and 16 points. Get your Kyler Murray, get your Lamar Jackson, get your guy who gives you the boom, the rushing upside, and then take this guy as your second quarterback or even your third quarterback, depending how heavy you go at the quarterback position. But I agree. I don't think it's all about rushing. I think you have to be safe. Like Baker Mayfield, he's not really safe, like he'll boom, but very rarely. But he's usually hovering around like 10 points, really hard to watch, really not good for the passing game of his team. But like a guy like Derek Carr, you saw at the beginning of the year what he can do. You've seen some times when he can do something, but you would never take him as your first quarterback. That's the same way that I see Mack Jones.
Well, and I'd say even too, like in Dynasty, he's very valuable too, because he's not that guy that's running around getting hit all the time. He has good pocket presence. He's not going to take these big shots and get hurt. So you're going to have an asset that you're going to hold on to for a long period of time, at least.
Mm-hmm. And then like, some of the guys, some of the mobile quarterbacks kind of catch some flack for being inconsistent in their ability to throw the football. But then you get a pocket passer and they're like, oh, well, he can't run. So sometimes you have to take, like, if you can get the best of both worlds, get your pocket passer, get your running quarterback, and then whatever after that, you're fine. Then you get the best of both worlds out of it. You get the safe floor guy, you get the boom quarterback, and your roster's set to go. So, you can't have it all. And we're seeing that, especially like a guy like Kyler Murray. He loves to run. He loves to move out of the pocket. He's missed the last 2 weeks. You look at Jalen Hurts. He was a great mobile quarterback. He's become far more accurate, but not so great for fantasy football now. So, you can't have it all, but you can have a mixture of the two, I think. And that's a really good way to construct a roster, is to get a good mix of what type of quarterback you have and not lean fully on like a pocket passer or not fully lean on that mobile quarterback, despite how great mobility is for dynasty football or for fantasy football, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, We kind of talked about the two names, but we'll quickly touch on them in Tuddy or Muddy as we transition in. Mack Jones, he had his second top 12 finish of the season, his first top 5 finish. Across the board, he ranks largely in the bottom half in most of his efficiency categories, 17.5 points per game. Only one game under 10, 7 of them over 15, only 4 of them over 20. For fantasy, like we've been saying, he seems to be a safe play, someone you wouldn't take as your QB1 or a top 12 quarterback, but can potentially give you a safe floor. My question was Dynasty, Tuddy or Muddy. I think we both agree he's a Tuddy if he's drafted at the right position. Is there anything more you want to add on to the Mack Jones?
Oh, not really. I think for Dynasty it's pretty easy, Tuddy. And I mean, like, I don't think he's going to be one of those guys getting up there. Like, if you did a startup today, that he'd be like a top 10 quarterback at this point in time yet. So, and that's kind of, we saw a little bit of that with Joe Burrow last year too. It's kind of hard to compare the two, but like where he was getting up in the top, where he's getting to be like the 9th quarterback drafted, that's where it's kind of like, well, do we really believe that far ahead yet or not? And Trevor Lawrence was kind of getting in that range earlier in this year in terms of startups, at least.
I love it. Great take there. Ramondre Stevenson, of course, he took full advantage of Damian Harris being out, rolled for a 2,102 on the ground and 4 and 14 through the air on 5 targets, finishing as the RB2 with 27.4 PPR points. Do you think, we kind of touched on it, I think it can be, but do you think this can be maintained? Will this threaten Harris going forward, or can they coexist together? Or does it just muddy the situation in this backfield even more? I mean, I kind of touched on it. I think it's really safe. I think it's a good situation for Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harrison. Like you said, Brandon Bolden won't be all the way out, but he's probably someone who will be on your waiver wire. You're not going to really own him. You might pick him up in a major pinch or in an injury situation like we just saw this past week, where Brandon Bolden did see a little bit of work, but nothing too relevant for fantasy. Anything you want to add beyond what I did for Ramondre?
I think in terms of this situation, it's going to be a little bit muddy though too, just because you've got the two guys. Now we've seen Ramondre Stevenson do good, but then what's going to happen when Damian Harris actually comes back? Are they going to split it? Are they going to... Because, Ramondre Stevenson's been inactive at times this year, healthy scratch. So obviously there's something they don't trust in him. And even, he came out and balled out in the preseason. He came out and balled out now. So it's just like, what's going to happen when Damian Harris comes back? I think the situation is a little bit muddy. I think if you can get rid of Ramondre Stevenson for a decent price at this point in time, I'd probably do it, just because who knows what his future value is going to hold because Damian Harris has looked all right most of the year. He just can't stay healthy to save his life either, And we kind of seen that for a couple of years now. I think he's got 1 year left on his deal. So maybe after he leaves, then maybe it's the Ramondre Stevenson time. But both of them only have like 3rd and 4th round draft capital. So it's not like they're too highly invested in either one either.
Yeah, and I mean, we can't forget, James White is still there in the back of everybody's mind. If he comes back next year, what happens next year? If he comes back into the picture, well, of course, we know the Patriots love James White. We know Bill Belichick loves James White. So he's going to try and get him in there and get him involved. Although he doesn't take away from the groundwork necessarily, he may cut into everybody's PPR upside by taking away pretty much all the work through the air. Because as we saw right before he got hurt, he had almost exclusive coverage of the receiving work out of that backfield. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as the offseason rolls on, and as we see, as the rest of this season rolls on, and how are they going to split it? How's this whole backfield going to be? But this is starting to really look like, a typical New England Patriots running back room where you got 3 or 4 guys. You never know which one you want to have. So you might as well grab as cheap of one as you possibly can get and sit him on your bench and hope that he kind of booms for you and you can sell him, or he booms for you on the weeks you really need him to boom for you. So the difficult situation with the New England Patriots backfield there for sure. Next up, we move into another backfield that, I think it's a pretty clear picture, but people are obviously going to get hyped up because they were getting hyped up at the start of the season for this guy. And that's AJ Dillon. Of course, Jones is due to miss at least this week for sure, maybe even 2 weeks with an MCL sprain. Dillon took advantage of the weather and the Jones injury to put up an RB3 performance with 26.8 PPR points, 21, 66, and 2 on the ground, plus 2 and 62 through the air on 2 targets. Jones just signed a new contract. So has a window opened for you to move Dillon again if you held him through the preseason hype, as I think he's going to take some work from Jones. He's managed 10 plus points in 4 of 10 games. This past week was his first time getting over 20. What are your thoughts? Dynasty Tuddy, Muddy, sell? Is he a buy for some circumstance that I may not be able to see right now?
I think if you got him, you're probably selling him right now. Like, that's the best case scenario. Like you alluded to, that Aaron Jones does have that contract, but they can get out of Aaron Jones's contract after next season as well. But then AJ Dillon's only got 1 more year left on his rookie contract at that point in time. So then you got to give him an extension. So it just gets really messy when you get into like all the different variables that could happen with that. Especially the Packers are a weird organization when it comes to contracts and finances and all that stuff too. But I think if I have AJ Dillon, if I need to play him, I'll play him. But if I can sell him, I'll sell him. But I think in redraft, if you have him, you're probably playing him, or you're trying to trade him away to like the Aaron Jones owner if you can get something decent for him. Maybe you can even do the same thing in Dynasty. But it's kind of interesting with the Aaron Jones injury too, because they said 1 to 2 weeks, but it actually might end up being 3 weeks because they got to buy after that 3rd week. So then they could give him like a whole month off essentially.
Yeah, no. And I mean, another circumstance to think about in Green Bay is the idea of Aaron Rodgers and where is he going to be, and what impact does not having Aaron Rodgers in back there have on the running back room. And so, I mean, altogether, it's kind of a muddy situation, but you were given an opportunity to sell AJ Dillon really high at the start of the season when he was garnering a massive hype train. A lot of people held beyond and are suffered for it. And now you're getting this 1, 2, 3 week window, like you said, where you can probably, if people don't believe in that one game, maybe give it another game. And then really your window that's it. You know, you got a week, move them to someone who's trending towards the playoffs, try and get some picks. You know, he may not be worth a 1st round pick or anything, but you might be able to get a player with that you can trust more, that has more stability, a bit more of a safer floor, more upside for you. So I would definitely be thinking about that. And if you are a big Green Bay Packers fan, I was listening to Andrew Brandt this morning, and they're selling off a bunch of shares. I believe it's 300,000 shares at $300. You have no say in what happens in the organization. You just get a piece of paper saying you have a share. So if you have $300 sitting around and you want to buy a singular share in, because they're unique, they're a publicly run, football team, and they have a board instead of an owner. So this is your opportunity to get some ownership of the Green Bay Packers. If you're interested, I think that's tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So
yeah, I seen that too. Cause Kurt Benkert, the practice squad quarterback, he's like, maybe they'll put me on the 53-man roster if I buy a share, or at least I can vote myself up or something.
It is so weird. Such a weird concept to think about in Green Bay.
It's almost like a scam in a way, because it's just like you get a piece of paper, we get money, and it doesn't, like, you don't get a dividend, you don't get, like, technically there's a meeting once a year, like if you got enough of the people there to go to it and they really wanted to say like, hey, fire Mark Murphy or Brian Gutekunst or something, if you had enough people there, then you could do it. But like, it's not going to happen because there's so many shares and they sold them for like last 60 years.
Yeah, exactly. They sell them off. I can't remember what he said. Like every 10 or between 10 and 20 years, they do a sell off like of a bunch of shares. Yeah, exactly. Eventually, maybe it'll mean something, but for the time being, it's just a nice collector's edition thing. Very unique thing that you're not getting from any other football team. Next up, Brian Edwards. Some of you may know him as Randy Moss. He finally had himself a game. He went 3 for 88 and 1 on 4 targets. Of course, the 1 touchdown probably helped massively. If not, we're looking at an 11.8 point performance and fallen outside the top 24 again. He's now seen 4 targets in 4 straight games, despite the Ruggs departure. He's only managed 5+ targets in 3 of 9 games this season. He's produced 50 yards or more in 4 games. touchdowns in only 2 games. Are people still holding on to a pipe dream with this one? Do you think he's worth holding on to? Or do you think this offense does not look the same without Henry Ruggs? I get they brought Deshaun Jackson in, who kind of soured people's taste in his mouth with the fumble this past weekend, but it doesn't look the same. Something seems off without that big, deep threat to really open up the field. What are you doing with Bryan Edwards?
This is like a tough one because I really like Bryan Edwards coming out of South Carolina. There's so many things behind him that obviously look good. And I don't think like the Raiders have ever really tried to use him the right way though, too. They keep trying to push him down the field, and it's just like, he's like a big physical wide receiver. This is not like how you're supposed to be using him. So, I mean, like if you can sell him and you can get something decent for it, do it. If not, then I guess you just hold on to him for now at this point in time. I'm trying to remember. Somebody offered me something for him in a dynasty league, and I'm like, this is kind of tempting, but like the player they offered me, it's like, it's slightly better, but I really don't like that player either. So it's like,
Yeah, it's so tough to decide if, eventually he's going to be worth something and you should move him. But I feel like the hype was probably there when he was getting comps to Randy Moss and Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens and whatever other crazy things people are saying based off of literally team practices and preseason games. That was probably the window. I think you're kind of stuck with him until the Raiders figure out what's going on because, I mean, the assumption would be there's going to be a new coach. There's going to be a whole new staff. They're going to kind of turn over everything again there in Vegas and clean up their act. And right now, you just don't know what's going to go on. Bryan Edwards will be on the team, but what type of role will he have? Will he be used properly? But, I mean, if you can get something decent out of it, someone you trust a little bit more, go ahead. Why not? Take the shot because you just never know with Bryan Edwards. But you don't want to be looking, you're 2 years deep into your career. I understand your one was semi a write-off with the injuries and stuff, but you don't want to be going into year 3 and still have all these question marks like Bryan Edwards does on your dynasty roster.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something too. I'm trying to remember what it was. But it's so weird because like Derek Carr talks him up all the time, but yet he never throws him the ball. It's like,
yeah, I mean, 4 targets. Like you're basically the number one. Well, okay, Hunter Renfrow is the number one wide receiver on that team. Let's just face it. But like you're technically, by like size, speed, everything you want in a receiver, he's technically like your number one wide receiver, and he's seeing 4 targets a game and in 4 straight games, and somehow you can't really get excited about that. And Hunter Renfrow seeing like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 targets, seeing so much work because he's working in the slot with Darren Waller and everyone's busy covering Darren Waller. But like you would expect more from Bryan Edwards at this point, especially with the departure of Henry Ruggs. But like I said, I don't think that offense is running the same without Henry Ruggs opening up the top for them.
Oh, I remember what else it was. Have you seen about that draft class that Bryan Edwards was in? He's the only guy left that they drafted in that entire draft class. So they had.
Yes, I did see that because they had the buddy they
Henry
shipped off to
Ruggs.
Miami. The receiver, the Bowden. They drafted him.
Yeah, Lynn Bowden, the running back receiver, whatever you want to call him.
Yep. And then I think they had an offensive lineman that they released. And yeah, I saw the list out there and he's the last man standing. Like, imagine.
Yeah. Well, because they got rid of Arnett because he made the stupid video with the big old gun. And just off topic a little bit, how stupid are you to do that when you have an injury? You should be focused on getting back to playing football, not just making stupid videos with guns saying you're going to come after
Apparently
people.
people are saying, what is it, Vegas? Is it Vegas that's doing this? Because, these guys are young. You're giving a lot of money to 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, first, second-year players in the NFL. And these situations are coming up in, Sin City in all its glory.
Yeah.
But you can't just go off and sign a bunch of 27, 8, 9, and 30-year-olds to fill out your roster because you don't trust young kids. So
at some point in time, you have to be a better judge of character, which apparently John Gruden wasn't. And Tanner Muse was the other one that was on that list too. He was a safety at Clemson. They tried to convert him to linebacker and it didn't work, so they cut him, which was a terrible pick just to start with. Let's just talk about that real quick.
Yeah, that's tough when you look back at a class that was so recent. And this is a predicament that you're in only in Vegas / Oakland because it was still happening in Oakland too.
Well, I hope that Mayock just gets one draft class of his very own because since he's been there, it's just these are Gruden's guys. Besides Alex Leatherwood, who is apparently Tom Cable's guy, who just had no chance of playing tackle in the NFL either way. He was a guard all the way. They finally figured it out after 6 games, though.
I love it. I love it. I love talking smack about some teams, but I mean, as an Eagles fan, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to talk too loud too quickly. This next one, I want you to rate these 3 from Dynasty Tud to Dynasty Mud. So there's going to be a Tuddy, despite how ugly this is. There's got to be a Tuddy. There's got to be a middleman. So Tuddy's more like a buy, a middleman who's more of a hold, and a Muddy who's more of a sell. Mike Williams, he exploded for 20 plus and for the first 5 games, including 230 plus efforts. Apparently, he is playing through an injury, so they said on the broadcast a couple weeks back, but he's failed to eclipse 10 points in 5 of the last 6. Jarvis Landry has been the people's favorite value pick year over year. He was banged up early, then OBJ departed, and thoughts were things would get better. So far, Landry has finished top 24 once in 6 appearances, including failing to even surpass the wide receiver 32 in the last 4 straight weeks. Russell Gage was seen as a value by some in the offseason when Julio was moved, and he was kind of the second man standing behind Calvin Ridley. And then, of course, the Calvin Ridley situation happened. So far, he did not play in 3 games. He laid an egg, a complete 0 in 3 games, including last week. And he's dropped 16.7 and 13.4 in 2 of 3 games in which he actually scored fantasy points. Give me your Tud, your buy, your hold, and your sell or your mud of those 3 guys.
Well, I don't want anything to do with like any of these Atlanta wide receivers at this point in time. So, like, you got Russell Gage, you got old Mike Zacchaeus, you got Tajay Sharp. I don't remember where I said this, but he's like the perfect wide receiver 4 to have on an NFL team because he can just fill in it like any position, but he's not like good enough to ever start on a team, or you shouldn't want him starting on a team. But then like Gage, like somebody there is always probably going to have like a decent week, but picking which one it's going to be impossible. I was never really too big on Russell Gage. He's a great person, not that great of a football player at this point in time, not like super consistent either. And Matt Ryan's just so hit or miss nowadays too. It's just like he plays really good against the crappy teams and then he plays terrible against the real good teams. So it's just hard to watch. But
so he would be your mud.
He'd be the guy I don't want any part of at all. But I guess I don't know. Like maybe you buy Mike Williams and hope he gets better again, because I feel like the price like shouldn't be that high now because you had the beginning of the year. Then he had that knee injury, but he played a bunch of snaps this past week, which was a good sign to see. But they still play like crap, and him and Justin Herbert weren't very good either. So I guess maybe he's the buy. Maybe
had a few games. Herbert's had like a few games in the last 4 or 5 weeks there where he's having a rough go. In his next, I think it's the next 3 weeks are pretty tough matchups for fantasy for him up against these teams and their opportunities against fantasy quarterbacks. So I don't know if you see that come around for Mike Williams, but yeah,
I just feel like maybe his value dipped enough that where you can buy him and then you can kind of make it back up at some point in time. And then I guess Jarvis Landry is just kind of hold because he's that guy you can throw in your lineup just kind of in a pinch, bye week, somebody gets hurt. It's never going to kill you.
Yeah, I like it. Matt's over here saying his order would be Williams, Landry, Gage. He would be holding out hope that Mike Williams will go somewhere in the offseason where he can be in a 1A, 1B situation. And of course, I think we can all agree we don't trust Baker Mayfield, and we really hope that they go a different route at quarterback. But at this point, it's a very tough situation to figure out who's doing what at the quarterback position, especially with such a murky quarterback class coming out.
Well, Baker's dealing with 3 separate injuries now too.
Yeah,
so his foot's bad, his shoulder's bad, now his knee's bad, and Jarvis Landry's been dealing with a knee injury for like most of the season too. So at least holding him, it's probably going to get better at some point in time. I don't know when, but
agreed. And also in the comments, he said if Gage was going to emerge, he'd have done it already. I agree. If you're going to emerge, you don't lay 3 eggs in a season. Like, that's bad. That's really bad. So for me, I think I tend to feel the same way. I feel like if you can buy Williams, he's probably the one you can buy almost. Gage would probably be the cheapest, but you can't trust him. I would probably buy Williams because he's got the best upside, plus he may have free agency on his side. And Landry's like the ultimate hold. He's always a hold and see. He's likely the guy you're going to hold, and you're going to end up stuck with him until he's 35 and completely riding off into the sunset. So he's almost like the ultimate fantasy hold. Year in, year out, draft him wherever he lands because he usually lands at wide receiver, between wide receiver 30 and 40 in your draft. So I mean, to me, he's like the ultimate grab him where you can and hold him where you can, because eventually things should get better for Landry. We've seen him do really well. So there's no reason to sell low, because you'd have to sell very low at this point with what he's going through in Cleveland.
It's kind of like the Julian Edelman effect. You just kind of keep having him on your team until he gets too old and falls apart.
Or completely retires out of the blue like he did to some owners.
Well, his knee was gone, so and he was
exactly
trying to play through it for a while.
It is similar with Landry too, because he's usually banged up every single year, and there's usually something. So I mean, it's tough to say, but yeah, at this point, like I grabbed Gage in a couple of redraft leagues and best ball leagues. Like, oh man, look at it! Look how far he dropped. I should have let him keep dropping. Clearly should have let him keep dropping. Next one up, this was for Jim. So, I mean, sucks that Jim couldn't be on, but he wanted to talk Rondale Moore. Moore's averaging 8.4 points per game in PPR. He's only managed to eclipse 10 on 3 occasions, twice in the first 2 weeks. He's managed 30 yards 3 times. They seem to be manufacturing the touches for him, mixing him into the rushing game. Plus, his average depth of target currently sits at 1.6 yards. With a 5.3 yards after the catch per target, and only 3.4% of the team's air yards. Is it time to get out from under him in Dynasty? Or I guess the bigger question was, is he a good buy low? Do you trust him enough in fantasy that he's going to start to become relevant if you go out there and buy him right now?
I feel like in Dynasty, if you can buy him low, I don't even know what you call buying low at this point is, really, honestly. Like, if you could get him for like a 3rd round pick, I'd do it every day of the week, but I don't think anybody that has Rondale Moore is probably not going to give you that for that.
I'd almost consider a second so far in this class, and what I'm reading and what I'm seeing, the kind of the coming out of it being, I might almost consider a second this year, because he's probably worth more than the receivers who may be in the 2nd round of your rookie drafts this year.
Yeah, I'm just like looking back. He was going at the beginning of the 2nd round last year, end of the 1st round occasionally. But the thing with him is Christian Kirk and AJ Green both might not be there next year, since they're both free agents. I know, like, his snap share wasn't the greatest. Like, this week it was down, but he had a concussion. He had a neck injury as well. Like, I didn't even think he was going to play this week, to be honest. And then he still went out there and played like 30% of snaps, which to me is a good thing. But I hope, like, as Chase Edmonds is out, they start to use him a little bit more in that short, quick passing game. But, it's one of those things I saw somewhere on Twitter, and people were like, oh, people overreacting about Rondale Moore not having a big depth of target or anything. And they're like, oh, that's how he's going to be used all the time. So it's like, it's kind of like people freaking out for nothing at this point in time. Like, at this, like, next year, hopefully you should be on the field more. Like, having Christian Kirk there hurts him, because Christian Kirk plays in the slot too. If you can get Christian Kirk out of there, if he's in the slot full time next year, it's going to help him out quite a bit. Plus, having Zach Ertz there too as well. It's just another mouth to feed, and it just kind of gets messy from there.
Yeah, the idea of, Zach Ertz is an impending free agent, like the idea that there's these 3 big names, you likely know one is moving on. There's a very good chance 2 may be moving on. Maybe opens a window for Rondale Moore next year. So if you can get him on the cheap, I'd probably give up a second for him this year. I know it doesn't sound cheap, but judging by everything I'm reading and seeing, especially from like some people I trust who watch film and stuff, I think a second's okay in this year's draft. It's got to stay in this year's draft, though, for it to happen.
if you can do like a late second, I'd consider that for sure. Ooh, you got a good question here.
Yeah, we got a question. Banged up Baker or Jimmy G this week? 100% Jimmy G. I don't think I can trust Baker Mayfield as far as he can throw a football right now.
So Jimmy Garoppolo plays Jacksonville. I'm taking him for this week, but I mentioned in my waiver wire video, it's just like, look at his schedule. Like the next 5 weeks are a cakewalk, and then plus the rest, plus the very end of the season is a cakewalk. He has like 2 hard games for the rest of the year. Like, so as long as he stays the starter, and I don't think as long as he's healthy, I don't think they're going to bench him unless he plays like complete crap one game. But I don't think they really want to put Trey Lance out there this year. And even the game when Trey Lance was out there, the offense was so dumbed down. There was no motion. And if you watched the Monday Night Football game last night, that's all the announcers are saying. Look at the motion. Look, or well, I guess it was Peyton and Eli.
They were loving. I was like, watching the other broadcast. They were loving Jimmy Garoppolo. Like I don't watch a Brady cast, but this the other cast that was going on that probably gets way less viewership. They were praising Jimmy G the whole time. They showed Lance and they were like, why would you play Lance when you got Jimmy G? Look what he's doing. And he was torching an LA Rams defense that hasn't been playing up to the level we saw last year, but it's still the LA Rams defense.
And if you take out that like Rams game, or not the Rams game, the game when they played in the rain against the Colts, if you take that game out, Jimmy G's been like great all season. He's, minus the injury games, minus the rain game, he's been very good. So, and now he has his full complement of weapons.
I'd be super nervous of Baker Mayfield and when he won't be able to complete a game. Like, there's got to be a line where this poor guy is like, he can't cross it. Like, and I feel like we're getting there. And you don't want to be that guy saying, yeah, I started Baker this week as my QB and he gets you like 3 or 4 points and then he has to leave the game because he's too banged up or he's too in pain or whatever. Like, I feel like we're getting to that point, especially with the situation that Cleveland is in right now. They're giving him every chance to play for the contract, but it's almost at this point like it's hurting,
killing him.
Exactly.
Well, and I watched a little bit of that Patriots-Browns game in the beginning, and they were saying he is going to sleep with the splint on his foot because of how much pain he's in. And then he's like, I'll rip it off like 3 hours into the night or whatever. But I don't think he actually ends up playing this week. I wouldn't be surprised if Case Keenum starts this week and just let him heal up a little bit.
Yeah, especially with the aspirations of getting to the playoffs, you probably want to roll with Baker as your quarterback, as ugly as that sounds, over Case Keenum. So, yeah, me and Craig here are going Jimmy G on that one. Read that comment. Tell me what it says, Craig.
Also, how are you doing? I don't remember which of you I follow, but it came from the Annoying Bird app. Bonus question to remain relevant. Mack Jones better than Jimmy or nah? Trying to fill Stafford bye week. So I like Mack Jones better this week against the Falcons.
They're both such good matchups. They both should be able to land safely between 20 and 25. Like, you got the Falcons and then Jimmy G's got, did you say the Jags? Like,
yeah, but they could just run the ball 40 times against them like they did on the Rams last night too. So then,
but Mack Jones, same situation. If Damian Harris is back this week and they're going through walkthrough, like, you could just go with Bolden, Stevenson, and Harris and really just run the ball down Atlanta's throat and just try and control the pace of the game and just get out there with a win because it's Thursday night.
Yeah, I feel like the Patriots probably are more likely to throw more passes, so that's where I lean on that side, I guess.
I like it. Definitely. So hopefully we helped you there in avoiding Baker. And, I think I lean more the Jimmy G way. Craig leans the Mack Jones way, but I feel like you really can't go wrong either way. You're definitely getting a safe floor and a chance at getting a bit of a nicer in-between ceiling type thing with both of them with their matchups this week. Last Tuddy or Muddy before we get into a word from Viridian Global. TJ Hawkinson and Mike Gesicki, they both laid eggs. Gesicki for the second time this season. Gesicki's currently the tight end 3 on the season. Hawk the tight end 5. TJ Hawkinson averaging 0.8 points more per game. Who is your Tuddy and who is your Muddy going forward in Dynasty? I honestly think that I'd be still rolling with TJ Hawkinson despite the situation with Mike Gesicki. I feel like there may be a lot of things changing this offseason in Miami. And I mean, Gesicki just started finally getting more looks this year with the banged up receiving weapons that are out there.
Yeah, so it's definitely Hawkinson for me. His situation should only get better. Like Jared Goff's not going to be playing quarterback forever, I guess. Hopefully not, at least.
You pray.
Well, and like he only had one target this week, but he ran the second most routes on the team. Jared Goff got banged up, only threw for like 140 yards or something like that, 2 and 5 quarters, which is just terrible. First of all, Gesicki, like he had the easier matchup and he goose egg too. He doesn't really have any other competition there. I guess Hawkinson doesn't have much competition outside of Swift either, though.
And I think I mean the weather wasn't on Detroit's side. I mean, look at their I think they had 3 running backs finish in the top 30, 2 of them in the top 24, and the rain was bad. Like that was just coming down. Like Pat Fryermuth had that fumble, which probably can be more attributed to the weather than he himself. And they played their tie, a 16-16 tie. So that just shows how bad that weather situation was. And Mike Gesicki, he drew 7 targets and still managed to come up with a goose egg. Like, I think you have to try really hard to lay an egg on 7 targets.
Well, and the thing with Gesicki too, he either stays in Miami and it's kind of muddy there, or he's a free agent and he goes somewhere else, but he's not a regular tight end. He doesn't play tight end. He plays out wide. He plays in the slot. He plays more slot snaps than any other tight end in the National Football League. He averages like 3 inline snaps a week right now for this season. It's just like, but he's that weird pseudo tight end where he's big, but he always plays out. Like, it's really interesting to see what teams are going to be willing to pay guys like him and Eric Ebron this offseason and how they value those going forward. And if he doesn't land in the right situation, like he could just be dust really easy. And this is like, he's coming out this year, but it's because there's no Devontae Parker there. Will Fuller broke his finger. Apparently it was a lot worse than we initially expected, but there's a chance he could be back this week too. But like, so if Parker and Fuller are there, what's Gesicki going to do? Probably nothing.
Yeah.
For the rest of this year. And then you still have, I think, another year of Parker. You got Jalen Waddle there. They're probably going to get some other pieces there. If Hunter Long comes along in his development, then if they even keep Gesicki, it's not very pretty either.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I mean, it almost feels like he could end up like Austin Hooper. He goes test free agency, looks like people are like, oh, he could get a good landing opportunity. He lands, people are like, oh, maybe. And then he kind of just disappears into oblivion, similar to Austin Hooper. That's kind of what I think.
Could be a lot like Jonnu Smith last year, except Jonnu Smith actually can play in line and block.
Exactly. And it's just a shame because if it was just Jonnu Smith instead of Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, I think Jonnu Smith, you'd be talking about him as maybe a top 6, top 8 tight end. Instead, Hunter Henry is completely vulturing touchdowns from Jonnu Smith, which, as we know, last season, Jonnu Smith had a really high touchdown rate. And it's something he had to continue to live up to in New England in order to live up to the expectations that people had him at.
Well, they've been using Jonnu a lot in line to block because Hunter Henry's really struggled to block this year too.
Which works in Hunter Henry's favor and fantasy owners' favor, I guess, more or less. We're going to move on into Gold and Fool's Gold, but first, a word from our sponsors over at Viridian Global.
Here at the Gold Jacket Podcast, we take family very seriously. We know that family doesn't always stop at the bloodline. It's a word that ensures trust. It's a word that, well, around here, means that I know that I can count on you to have my back. Viridian Global is family. A family of the Fantasy Collective, and that is the exact reason Viridian Global will have your back. And I don't just mean literally covering your back in the best apparel they can possibly outfit you in. I mean it every step of the way, from finding the brand that fits you best to tracking your order to making sure you are fully satisfied at every step. With over 50 brands a part of the Fantasy Football Collective family, what are you waiting for? Join the family now. ViridianGlobal.com.
Love it. There, we had Jim on. We didn't even realize it, but we still had Jim on. So let's move right into Gold and Fool's Gold for week 11. Of course, if you've never tuned into the show, welcome, and we hope you continue to come back on a weekly basis with us. Gold is our must start, one of our favorite starts of the week. Fool's Gold is someone who's deceptive and maybe someone you want to start, but you should probably consider not and maybe just go ahead and sit him. We'll start in the quarterback room, of course. Gold for me, Tua Tagovailoa. Apparently, it sounds like he's going to be a go this week, and he's playing the New York Jets. The New York Jets have allowed 25-plus points to 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks faced. This includes allowing 7 quarterbacks to get over 250 yards and 3 to get over 300. They also are currently on a wonderful 5 straight week stretch of multi-touchdown games allowed through the air to quarterbacks. Tua has gotten over 20 fantasy points in 3 of his 4 healthy games and was well on his way there against Baltimore before getting injured. The Jets are just really, really bad, and I trust Tua big time. His averages when healthy are top 10 quarterback right now. So I'm rolling Tua in this matchup. Craig, I know I didn't, since you were like 6-man sub, I gave you just the responsibility of finding a gold in each of these. So who's your gold QB?
Yeah, so I got fool's gold too if you want it, but I put for the gold QB, I put Mack Jones this week. He's coming in at quarterback 15 in ECR. He's going against the Atlanta Falcons. You don't get much easier matchups than that. So should finish as a top 10 quarterback this week as long as he, throws the ball more than 23 times. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess he did last week with only throwing the ball 23 times too. So maybe the magic number is 22.
Yeah, maybe that could be the magical number, and hopefully they don't go to a complete run game in that matchup. Fool's gold, well, I guess I'll have it as well from you, but Carson Wentz for me up against Buffalo. The Bills have only allowed 2 quarterbacks to eclipse 20-plus points. 3 have dropped below 10. 2 under 15. Wentz ranks 4th in interceptable passes and 13th in danger plays before last week. And we know he tried to throw a few more of those danger plays and interceptable passes. And the Bills are a team who will make you pay for those mistakes. The Bills in the last 5 weeks have only allowed 1 touchdown through the air and have 6 interceptions. 4 of them were Mike White. So I'll give you an even better stat. On the season, 6 touchdowns allowed to quarterbacks, 15 interceptions total. Only 2 quarterbacks have managed to get over the 250-yard threshold through the air. Carson Wentz has just he's been okay for fantasy, but he's been so dangerous. There's so many times you're sitting there and there's a couple plays a game that could turn into interceptions. This is one of those games that if he tries to pull that bullshit, the Bills will make him pay.
Yeah, and definitely with Carson Wentz, I know like people were touting him for a while. They're like, he's only got 1 interception. I'm like, yeah, but he should have like 5 more. Doesn't mean that
definitely
somebody dropped it that it didn't happen. Like he had like the easiest like 4 or 5 game stretch for a while there too, because he played like the Jets, the Jaguars, like Houston, and then I already said the Jaguars. That was last week. He still didn't even do good versus them. He got like 8 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of fool's gold, I put Justin Herbert down. He's coming in at quarterback 9 in ECR going against the Steelers, who have a relatively decent defense overall. Not as good as it's been some years, but still pretty good overall. As long as Joe Hayden's healthy in this game, he only played, I think, like 23% of snaps last week. So I'm not sure what his injury is, if I'm assuming it's an injury. So, but as long as he's playing, I think, the Chargers, they've kind of been struggling on offense. Justin Herbert's not played as well. So it could be a tough matchup for him overall.
I like it. Definitely a good one there. Running back gold. I'm going with the stack. Myles Gaskin against the New York Jets. Myles Gaskin is actually the RB20 on the season in PPR with 4 top 24 appearances. That is it. And 6 games as the RB30 or worse. Name me a running back for fantasy scoring who's benefited more from the torrent of injuries at the position. Myles Gaskin's averaging 5 less points per game than he did last season. He's managed 10-plus points in 5 games, 4 of those against defenses that ranked in the bottom 12 of the league against running backs. And, of course, the New York Jets are the worst defense against running backs. In 8 games, he's seen 4 more targets and eclipsed 50 yards rushing only 2 times. He ranks 9th in weighted opportunities. So he is getting maximum opportunity, top 10 opportunity, and he is a real dud. As I alluded to above, the Jets are putrid offensively, defensively, and they're further away from any relevancy than people think. I believe the Jets are giving up the most fantasy points per game by over 5 points on the second worst to the running back position. They're 3rd most yards on the ground, 3rd most through the air, and the most touchdowns on the ground by 5 over the second worst. Myles Gaskin, man, if there's an opportunity to start him, you're really running low on opportunities because the schedule does get a little bit harder for Miami. This is another golden opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm just glad you said the Jets are the worst team against the running back. Now it's not the Texans anymore.
The
Texans, it was the
are
Texans
actually,
for a long time.
Yeah, the Texans are actually like 8th or 9th worst. They're not even that bad against a running back anymore. So
We got better last 3 weeks.
there you go. It could be the matchups too, but we'll say you got better. We'll say you got better.
Yeah, and then Gaskin, a lot of what goes into him too. He's not catching the ball quite as much this year, and that offensive line's been terrible. Like, there's no easy way around that. But in terms of my gold, I got David Montgomery. He came back the last time we saw him. They had a bye week. He's going to be as healthy as he's probably going to get the rest of the season. And he saw like 80% of the snaps last time. And we were like, oh, maybe Khalil Herbert will factor in. Well, didn't look like that way. Goes against Baltimore. It's kind of a middle of the pack matchup, but he's going to be out there. He's going to get touches. They're going to want to run the ball because when Bill Lazor's the offensive coordinator, they want to run the ball. Sorry, Adam Gase, you like throwing the ball 40 times a game for no reason.
Agreed. I like that one too. Fool's gold for me. I hate to say it, but I'm going to Antonio Gibson, man, against Carolina. Gibson continues to remain banged up. He faces a Carolina defense that has been fairly strong against the run, fairly strong altogether. Gibson's the RB19 on the season and finally managed his first top 12 performance last week. He isn't booming like you would have hoped. His 4 games over 15 points are buoyed by touchdowns, 2 multi-touchdown games, 1 with a 73-yard receiving touchdown. His true yards per carry, which discounts 10-plus yards, runs, ranks 43rd among running backs. The Panthers have given up a total of 5 touchdowns this season, literally to their running back position. The only thing working in his favor is that they've allowed 1 each of the last 5 games. I'm not taking anything away from the idea that Gibson got touchdowns, and obviously you're never going to take that away from him, but that just goes to show you need the touchdowns. Carolina may not necessarily be there to give them up. The Panthers are top 12 across the board in stats against running backs, yards per game, attempts per game against, touchdowns allowed per game. They're giving up the second least points per game against running backs. Outside of Zeke and Cook, no running back has managed 20 or more, and only one other has achieved 15 or more, and that was James Conner last week.
Yeah, and that's a good one. I actually went with his teammate, J.D. McKissick. He's coming in at running back 26 in ECR right now, which I think is super high. I think this is going to be a pretty boring game, back and forth, a lot of defense, not a lot of points scored, just kind of neutral game script the whole time. So I don't think it really favors either one of them. Obviously, we've seen Gibson get a little bit more work last week, so that kind of takes away a little bit from McKissick. So I don't think either one of them are guys that you should be too excited about this week. I think if you have Antonio Gibson, this is like your last chance to get out because you got the 2 touchdown games. So somebody might buy him now. Coming off that bye week, they're like, oh, maybe his shin's fine. It's not fine. Trust me, it's not going to be fine.
No, the way to recovery in this situation was rest. He's had no rest. So be very, very careful with Gibson. Wide receiver gold for me. Oh, boys, I'm doing it. It hurts. DJ Moore against the Washington football team. This is the get-right game for DJ Moore. Looks like they're preparing for Cam Newton to be the starting quarterback. The football team has given up the most touchdowns to wide receivers, the 4th most yards, and the 2nd most points per game to wide receivers. DJ Moore or Darnold has been a huge disappointment, and now Newton is in. DJ Moore's top 5 in air yards and unrealized air yards, and is seeing a catchable target percentage ranking 82nd among wide receivers. His 7 drops haven't helped either, ranking 2nd among wide receivers, but I think this is definitely an opportunity to get right, and Cam is going to look to win the job. They want to give Cam Newton a chance to win the damn job for next year. Like, that just blows my mind. But yeah, DJ Moore this week against football team.
For DJ Moore's sake, I hope Cam Newton's not the quarterback next year. Because
Agreed.
I've just been on this thing. I got the hashtag get DJ Moore a real quarterback for like 2 years now. I'm just like,
it's never ending.
Yeah, but I don't think Cam Newton's probably going to help his catchable ball percentage at all because he's not very accurate anymore. But it is definitely a good matchup. DJ Moore's obviously a great wide receiver, but when Sam Darnold went downhill, he went right downhill with him because of everything. But My wide receiver gold this week is actually Jamison Crowder. He's coming in at wide receiver 39 this week against Miami. Miami is terrible against slot wide receivers. Jets probably going to be behind in this game, have to throw the ball. Not sure who's going to be quarterback yet, whether it's Mike White, Joe Flacco, Josh Johnson, Zach Wilson, whoever. Somebody's going to throw the slot wide receiver. And, Corey Davis, probably the best wide receiver on the team, but he's going to see Xavier Howard or Byron Jones on the outside. So looking like a pretty good matchup for Jamison Crowder. Once again, they don't really have a tight end because Tyler Kroft's hurt. Ryan Griffin's just kind of a chugger at this point in time too. So I think he definitely has the potential to finish probably like a top 30 wide receiver, maybe a little bit upside for more this week, just based on volume and like PPR format.
I like it. Definitely a good one there. My fool's gold. This is going to be a tough one for owners to swallow. I got Deontay Johnson against the LA Chargers. Ben Roethlisberger's status still uncertain. And as much as that may matter because, he hasn't been great either, but he loves to feed Deontay Johnson. The Chargers are number 1 against opposing wide receivers, but are in the bottom 10 against both opposing running backs and tight ends. So this really feels like it could be leaning towards, a Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris type game, less the wide receivers. Johnson failed to hit the top 24 last week behind the arm of Rudolph, despite 13 targets and a 7-83 stat line against the Lions. Sure, weather definitely played a factor in this, but matchup is playing the major factor this week with the LA Chargers.
Yeah, so my fool's goal is actually Tyler Lockett this week. We've seen Russell Wilson come back last week, not look that good. He plays in the slot most of the time. Byron Murphy, the best corner for the Cardinals, plays in the slot most of the time too. So it's just not a matchup that I'm chasing this week. I think Tyler Lockett, we've seen him been kind of inconsistent or down, pretty much just down because it's not even inconsistent at this point in time. The beginning of the year was good, then it went downhill again, kind of like it does every year. He'll get back up at some point in time when Russell Wilson starts getting back to himself, but I don't think it's going to be in this game.
I like that one. That's definitely a good one. You definitely got to ride a roller coaster with Tyler Lockett, and you're probably going to be sitting him in your first round or second round playoff matchup, and he's going to go off for like 30 or 40 points. It's inevitable. It happens.
Probably 50.
Yeah, maybe even 50. Maybe even. Tight ends gold for me. I'm going to the CJ Uzomah against the Vegas Raiders. The Vegas Raiders are second worst in per game points allowed to the position. 5 of the last 7 games, the Raiders have given up 12 plus points to a tight end. Uzomah ranks top 10 in snap share and routes run among tight ends. He's top 3 in touchdowns with an astronomical 20% touchdown rate, and he is number 1 in points per target thanks to that touchdown rate. I think he's got a good chance to probably get you limited targets, but see maybe 1-2 touchdowns. Could even be a multi-touchdown game against this Vegas Raiders defense. So I'm rolling with CJ Uzomah.
Yes, I went with Adam Troutman. He's coming in at ECR tight end 17 at this point in time. He goes against your Eagles this week. Don't need to say too much about the Eagles against tight ends.
No.
Just talk about what they did against the Chargers. I think you talked about that before. So Troutman's getting more volume lately. He's been playing more than 80% of snaps last 3 games. Jawan Johnson was inactive 2 games ago, only played 15% of snaps last week. Nick Vanette's back healthy, so maybe he'll be around at some point, but he's just a blocking tight end either way. Troutman, him and Simeon got a little bit of chemistry, maybe. I have no idea, but they're also designing a couple plays for him here and there too. Some of them have not been quite successful, but if he gets in that end zone, he's definitely going to be a tight end, top 10, top 12 tight end this week, though.
100%. If you get touchdown, you're almost a lock for top 12 tight end at this point. But for anyone who wants more incentive to go at Troutman, we gave up 3 top 12 tight ends to the Chargers 2 weeks ago. 2 top 12 tight ends to the Denver Broncos this past week. So if you need any more reason, considering Adam Troutman's pretty much the only option, except likely Jawan Johnson, this will be the game he plays like 10 snaps and catches 2 targets, one of them being a touchdown. But no matter what, Adam Troutman is definitely a good play. I agree with that one for sure. Fool's gold for me. I'm going on the flip side of the ball. Dallas Goddard up against the New Orleans Saints. He's currently going through the concussion protocol and banged up, obviously, after a pretty brutal hit last week. He's seeing touches, but isn't getting the red zone touches or touchdown looks. 4 straight weeks now without a red zone look. Of course, last week he only played like 5 snaps before getting knocked out. No touchdown since week 4. He's over 5 catches only twice this year, 4 games where he's been over 50 yards. He's screams volatile to me, which is a damn shame because I love Dallas Goddard. The Saints are 8th best in point in per game average allowed to tight ends. The top tight end for an opponent has yet to score over 10 fantasy points against the Saints defense. 2 tight ends have put up 9, 2 have put up 8, and 2 have put up 7. So he's likely just going to miss being a top 12 tight end for you because he's going to probably come in below 10. There might even be a chance he doesn't play.
Yeah, I think he definitely has a chance to miss 2 this week. And my fool's gold tight end, it's probably going to get like eggs thrown at us or something because everybody loves him. It's Kyle Pitts. And he goes against the Patriots on Thursday night. The only really offensive weapon the Falcons have this week is Kyle Pitts. What do the Patriots do? Take away the top offensive weapon every single time. So if Cordell Patterson does not play at all this week, he's banged up. I think it was an ankle that he suffered. Then they're just going to be like, okay, we'll take Kyle Pitts away. We'll if Russell Gage or Olamide Zaccheaus or Christian Blake or Tajay Sharp or, God forbid, Frank Darby does something for once, they'll be happy with that. Or Mike Davis. Like, if Mike Davis scores a touchdown, they'll be happy. Like,
if Mike Davis does anything,
say.
I think it's going to hurt them a ton not to have Cordero Patterson in this week. I think that's going to be really bad for that offense. He is like the engine that made that offense. I'm going to say sputter. It didn't purr, but it sputtered and it gave you some points of feeling up and upbeat about it. But no, I agree. And you know what? On the Gold Jacket podcast, we will not throw eggs over throwing Kyle Pitts under the bus this year because we have spoke against him, and I picked him as fool's gold a couple weeks ago against I think it was against New Orleans because they were good against tight ends. And just because he moves out wide doesn't mean he's safe, because that just means that they can isolate the outside weapon with some help over top with the safety and stuff. So it wasn't spelling good for him. Of course, he has had a couple pretty brutal drops over the past couple weeks that also could have amounted to making him way more relevant in fantasy. But yeah, that is it. Craig, again, thank you so much for coming on. Shout out to everybody who joined us, Kyle and Matt down there in the comments section. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Follow the whole True North Fantasy Football crew right above Craig's head if you're watching. TrueNorthFFB.com, at TrueNorthFFB on Twitter, TNFF Network on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We got 4 shows a week. You do not want to miss any of them whatsoever. Oh, great. We got one last question. Is Tyler Boyd worth dropping in redraft? What do you think, Craig? I'll let you answer that.
I don't think so. I think he definitely has a role on this team still. He's still playing a ton of snaps, so there's going to be some rocky weeks there, but at the very least, he's a wide receiver 4 on your bench, so you can plug and play every once in a while if you need to. But like, unless there's somebody clear better out on your waivers, I'm probably not dropping him.
And at this point, I really don't think you're going to find anyone better on the waivers that you can justify making that move for. He's at Coach Craig, at Coach Craig Sport on Twitter. He also has a great YouTube channel to check out. He's dropping NBA DFS. He's dropping waiver wire shows. He is putting in a lot of work over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Connor10. Of course, I got my starts and sit piece coming out every Thursday morning where I give you 10 more names to consider in starting and sitting, bonus starts and sits to consider for the week outside of my gold and fool's gold. But this has been an absolute blast, Craig, and hopefully we get Jim back next week. Until then, we will see you next Tuesday.